Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm very aware that the next speakers are talking about food before we have food, so I've got a timekeeper and I can see you down there, so I'll endeavour to stay on time. Thanks for the introduction. I think I'll just throw out first that I'm not from this industry and I'm pretty new to it. It is what we would call, when I was in the military, an acronym-rich environment, and that's been a really steep learning curve, as have a range of other things. What I'd like to do today is to talk about the blueprint. I don't have time to go through the blueprint. I will touch on the goals at the end of my talk, but what I'd really like to do is talk about some of the things we're doing with the RD&E program, and how and why there is a blueprint and how we got to that blueprint. So some of you would be aware that there was a review of the RD&E program last year, and a range of recommendations came out of that which became initiatives and have been endorsed by LiveCorp and MLA. And to summarise very briefly there, so we've got a range of things happening, covering off those three sub-dot points there about firstly engagement with the industry. So that's about genuinely seeking the views of the producers and exporters in terms of what the RD&E money should be spent on in terms of research and then outcome. And it also goes to how the program communicates outwardly back to producers, exporters, and every other interested party. So there are obviously peak bodies, the organisations that are responsible for the program itself, politicians, the public, and so on. So we're looking at a range of things to actually be able to draw information in and communicate information out. And that's both about what the intention is with the RD&E funds in the broad, so it's the blueprint, and then as projects are selected and endorsed and funded, there's information going about what those projects are, but most importantly, what the outcome expectation of what those projects are. I think what we found when we spoke to a lot of people through 2018, they fell into a couple of groups. There were those who were aware of some of the things the program was doing, but were not necessarily sure how good the development, extension and adoption was occurring, if it was occurring at all. And then there was but they did feel genuine, in the main, the priorities were about right. And there was a broader group that really didn't have an understanding of what the RD&E program did or was doing or what it intended to do. It's worth keeping the program in context. It's only about $2.2 million a year, which is a lot of money compared to my bank balance, but in the broad scheme of the numbers we've heard today, it is a relatively small amount of money. So we can't be everything to everyone all the time. And even in terms of the priorities in the blueprint, or the goals in the blueprint, we can't address all of those all at the same time either. So this is about, going forward, it's about good decision making in terms of which projects do we pick, and we will base them on the goals and priorities expressed in the blueprint, and we need to balance that between cattle and sheep. We need to balance it with other aspects as well in terms of short and long-term project outcomes, and we need to know from the outset whether the outcome of something the RD&E program is funding is a research outcome only that will inform some other kind of research, or whether it has a specific outcome for industry that we would look then to develop and turn into material for extension and then adoption. So whilst I don't have a background in the industry, I do have a background in helping organisations make good decisions about how they invest money, and particularly how that investment then becomes an actual outcome that delivers something. And I think that's where the program has struggled for some time. Not in all cases. There's been some really good examples of things that have come out of the program, but we're going to focus on the thinking up front about what happens at the end when the research is done. And in some cases, we've already come to the conclusion that sometimes the organisation or person funded to do the research may not be in fact the best person or organisation to develop the extension material and assist with the adoption process. So why a blueprint? We want a document that goes out towards the 5-year mark that sets goals for research, development and extension outcomes. And you know, it is a guide only, so it will not be a list of projects. There are 5 goals at the moment, 5 goals, and a number of priorities underneath those goals. It'll provide visibility. The intent is for it to provide visibility outwards for what we want to do, both to industry but also to research organisations who look for research funding. You know, ideas come to the program sometimes which are not aligned with the program's goals, so the blueprint really provides a first gate for those organisations in approaching seeking funds. In terms of developing the blueprint, and where we're at with it at the moment is we're pretty much at a final draft now, and there's a couple of things to do with it before we pass it on for endorsement and then publication. But over the course of this year, a small team has visited a number of locations, I think Perth, Darwin, Townsville and or Brisbane, and in that process spoke with exporters, a number of exporters, peak bodies and a small number of producers directly, engaged with the Department of Agriculture, some research providers that have benefited from the program before about their ideas, and the RSPCA in Canberra as well. And bringing all that together, that was then compared with the research priorities for LifeCorp and MLA, or their strategic goals, and coalesced into what now are 5 goals. So there's some principles that underpin the blueprint and how we'll apply the blueprint. So it is about prioritisation. It is about representing the views of and the needs of producers and exporters equally, and that's a really important aspect, and I'll talk about the LERDAC committee itself in a moment. It has to be flexible to incorporate change. So this is not a 5-year fixed document, no change. The intention is we'll revisit that each year and we'll update it as necessary. But the document itself has to be, and the way we commit the money in the fund, has to be sufficiently flexible to and agile to respond to issues that emerge that perhaps were not expected. Similarly, the way we invest the money needs to be with organisations with varying levels of agility. Where we need a very solid academically based outcome, then some form of research institute is clearly the way to go. Where we need something faster, shorter, but accurate as well, then there are other opportunities. So the presentation earlier today, the Mercado figures around sheep and cattle, those outcomes were funded by the RD&E program. So that's a good example of where some of the resources of the program can be funded to deliver a good outcome, which provides, you know, fantastic array of information to be used in many different circumstances. Understanding the value of the industry is a really powerful set of facts in itself. Understanding how it flows through the supply chain and more broadly is also very powerful. Collaboration is an important aspect, so where there are other research activities going on that we can leverage off or collaborate with, we would seek to do that. We will also introduce the requirement for where it's research, pure research activity, that built into the contract with the research organisation we engage, there's a requirement for peer review as well, so that we know that academic studies that we receive are in fact accurate and defensible. And I'll just, the very last one there, assess individual projects on merit. You know, it really is about understanding the value of an idea and its development in accordance with the broader blueprint. About the program, so just a bit for clarity, if people don't know this, money comes from subscriptions through LifeCorp and MLA, and the federal government funds 50% of the program. It is administered by MLA, who actually run the program itself. There are three key outcomes which have been consistent across time: continuous improvement in animal health and welfare, improving supply chain efficiencies and regulatory performance, and enhancing market access and conditions. So there are two committees that assist the program achieve what it needs to achieve. Firstly, LERDAC, the Live Export Research and Development Advisory Committee, and the other is the Management Committee. I'll talk about that in a moment. We really want to focus LERDAC, being the industry representative committee, on that role, bringing the views of exporters, producers and the peak bodies into that forum to provide advice to the program. And the primary output of that, if you like, from now will be the blueprint and the management and implementation of the blueprint. That's a really important change, we feel, in that we want LERDAC to be providing the strategic advice rather than necessarily digging into the detail or being dragged into the detail of every single project. That still exists where we feel there's a need to do that, as a committee where we feel we need to do that, but that's not the primary role. The primary role is to provide strategic advice to the program itself. And that's also about understanding how we can best utilise the time of the people who put themselves forward or are put forward for LERDAC. We don't meet that often each year, and being confronted with 100 or 150 pages of documents to read for a one-day meeting doesn't generally produce the best outcome. So we want to focus at the strategic level. The Management Committee itself is the decision body, and why I describe it as that is that LifeCorp and MLA have a accountability responsibility for the expenditure of the funds, and they have to meet their own governance requirements for that. But it is the committee that will make the decisions based on LERDAC's advice around what should be invested in. The Management Committee also assists in supporting the commencement of projects, so there might be refinement of the ideas or the goals of a particular project, and we will manage well, I say we because I also chair the Management Committee. We'll steward that project through the course of its life. So the goals and priorities, and there are 5 goals, and as I said, I don't really have time to go into these in great detail, but there are 5 research goals. Each of those goals has a number of priorities associated with them. After that period of consultation that occurred earlier this year, we took the draft as it was then to LERDAC in September. And as a consequence, the committee members asked that it go out for a final consultation. So it was sent to LERDAC members and to a number of the peak bodies for final review. Their comments are back now and have largely been integrated into the final version of the document. So what's next? We'll finalise the blueprint, and that really, from this point, is about getting it signed off by the relevant organisations. We're going to go through a piece of work where we review the prior and current projects that have been done against those 5 goals to identify where there are gaps in the research that's been committed to in the past and at present, and invite both industry stakeholders and research organisations to bring forward ideas in line with the blueprint. And I think the fact that there will be a blueprint certainly will help some organisations understand where their ideas or their existing research fit into that blueprint. So the focus, I hope you get from that, the focus is on using the limited amount of money that's available to support live export through research, development and extension, that we use it in the right way, that we balance it appropriately between the various research domains, and that we're focused on and understand what we're investing in. So if we commence a project, everyone who has an interest in that project should also understand the time frame of the project and the outcomes that are expected from that project. And as I said, communications are important always, not for just the sake of communications, but so that, you know, when something is commenced, that everyone in the industry knows it is underway, that they're aware of the goals, the timeframes, and how it may also benefit them. That's what I wanted to say in a nutshell. I'm here all of today and tomorrow, and as I said, I am definitely the new boy on the block, so I would welcome people coming up to me and giving me sound advice about the Research, Development and Extension program, and I look forward to having those conversations today and tomorrow. We do have a few minutes, though, for some questions, if anyone would like to offer any.